My name is Steve Williamson. I'm with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 21. Nationally, we represent 1.4 million workers across the country. Our local has 35,000 members in Washington State, mostly in the retail industry, grocery workers, your local grocery clerks, also some healthcare workers, laundry workers, and others. First, I want to thank John very much. He's a friend of mine and a friend of our unions. Really helped us in our last negotiations with our grocery clerks a couple of years ago in a panel discussion. People really loved John and his work around time. I want to thank you all too for, I know people traveled across the country, people have been working on this issue for a long time. Appreciate your dedication, and this is how we build movements, it's how we build coalitions, by getting together. I think it's fair to say it's a nascent movement today, or maybe it's a rebuilding, maybe it's not nascent, maybe it's a recoming together. I'm going to give you a couple graphs with my hands here, and then get into a little bit, hopefully pretty brief, about some of how France came to have so much vacation and our labor movement, and compared to the French labor movement, and then really open things up once we hear from our final speaker about what you have on your minds. So a couple of things. First of all, in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, the labor movement was on the, from your point of view, on the ascent. Up to 30+% of workers were in labor unions. At the same time, so around that same time, productivity was increasing. But since then, the labor movement has been in a precipitous decline down to about 8% of the private sector workforce, maybe 12% or so overall of the workforce, while productivity has sharply increased, even though union representation has declined, and I would say worker standards have declined. Organizing, which is can be measured in different ways, campaigns won or lost. This is organizing new members into unions of their choice, or how many workers came into unions, but essentially has been relatively flat in many ways, while the polls clearly show, the tracking polls, that Hart Research tracking polls, a reputable firm, that the majority of workers who currently do not have a union has been increasing over time, as the majority of them would like to have a union if they could. This leads to why don't people organize, and it's because we don't really have the right to organize, and we don't really have the right to strike in some ways, and I want to bring that to what happened in France. I'm going to quote Samuel Gompers too. You got to be careful quoting Samuel Gompers. He was an anti-immigrant, racist, troubling guy in many ways, but he had some good quotes. He was the first president of the American Federation of Labor. He said, what does labor want? I think this, apart from the grammar, is right on. What does labor want? We want more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less guns, more learning and less vice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. And the last part I love the most. We want more opportunities to cultivate our better nature. And for me, this piece about what we are, not just what we do, is the essence of the labor movement coming together with vacation. And then, of course, the other chant or mantra of the 8-hour workday, don't know how many folks know this today, but it was 8 hours work, 8 hours sleep. Maybe you've done this already today. I came in late. 8 hours for what we will. And what I like about that is what we will is kind of doesn't matter to anyone else. It's up to us what we want to do with our time, but we want those 8 hours to do with as we please. And again, it's about us and having real freedom, and the chains removed, not just the economic chains, but as you know, the bread and roses sentiments, the same kind of thing. It's about our essence, not just about our material piece. So this piece I learned about France really comes from my hobby, what I spend a lot of my vacation time on, that's bicycling. And there's a guy named Jan Heine. He is an immigrant from Germany who has popularized this form of bicycling called randonneuring. And randonneuring means ambling or rambling in the French term. It's just, and I don't say it the right way, the way the French would. My wife corrects me. But it's, and even that is a notion of you're not bicycling for to win a race, you're out there to explore the world. And bicycling in France really took off once the Popular Front took power in 1936. And it was a short time period from June of 36 to June of 37, a coalition government in France, and they won in the, I'm going to butcher this too, the Matignon agreements, some very key pieces of legislation. But what happened was, because one of the things they got was French workers got 2 weeks vacation for the first time. Paid vacation, thank you. People who live 40 miles from the sea, families who for generations had never witnessed the ocean, the mighty roar of the ocean, now could take their vacation because bicycle transportation was becoming more dependable, and they could travel as a couple, as a family, as friends, and go to the ocean, as an example, or go to the mountains. They could take trains, but the trains just went to the city centers. They didn't go to the countryside. So the notion of touring, of going out, began with kind of cycle touring, because only the few rich owned the Citroën two-cylinder or whatever it was. And so what happened was you saw bicycles developed rapidly as a form of transportation, and touring and cyclo-touring became the thing. And there's fabulous footage. If you want to see some footage, I can recommend later. Great footage of people on bicycles built for 2, for 3. The whole city center was all around the bicycle, traveling the countryside. But what happened was that the Popular Front, the Great Depression, which was not as severe in France as it was in the United States, financial scandals, the rise of Hitler in Germany, and the growth of some of the far-right leagues led to the Popular Front's rise in power in reaction to those things. And they got 2 weeks paid vacation. But they got some other things as well, and this is where I think the link to the labor movement is. They got the legal right to strike. They got the removal of obstacles to union organizing. One of those was a company couldn't fire people without approval of a certain branch of the government that would bless a firing. Well, today, one of our chief obstacles in union organizing is workers get fired all the time, and workers are threatened. Everyone knows if you start an organizing campaign, it's kind of cliche. The first thing the company does, because there's no real penalty for them, is they're going to fire people. So they won that in 1936. We're still fighting for that. They won blanket 7 to 12% wage increases. Place in one area for women, they won 400% wage increases. They got women into the parliament before women got the right to vote in France. And they got the 40-hour work week. So that leads to, so what's up with labor today, right? Where are we? And just another little quote around, because it gets complicated, the politics in France, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it, but they had this guy, Leo Lagrange, who was the Undersecretary for Sports and the Organization of Leisure. This was a new position at the time. But it was highly controversial because you had Hitler and Mussolini mobilizing youth for sport to militarize the youth population for wartime efforts. You had people believing that only the bourgeoisie went on vacations, and you're either a part of the working class or part of the bourgeoisie, and if you're taking time off, then maybe you've leapt into the wrong camp. So the notion of taking time off and sports and those kinds of vacations was a complicated mix. He kind of tried to ride the middle path of the politics and said, our simple and human goal is to allow to the masses of French youth to find in the practice of sport, joy, and health, and to build an organization of the leisure activities so that workers can find relaxation and reward to their hard labor. But this was a battle, even when the left was kind of in control about what you do with your spare time, because people weren't so used to having that kind of spare time.